Will you shift to Canada if that law passes? What do you mean? Canada and England literally are already ahead of the United States of America in terms of like aggressively pursuing anyone and everyone that says anything about Israel. Yeah, Canada's really going to be a safe haven for me. Canada literally adopted the IHRA definition already. Anyway, I want to do the Tim Pool video of them tackling me and talking about it. But before we get to that, yeah, we're going to do Mike Huckabee. We're going to talk about how the State Department has decided that today, the State Department has decided that, and this might come as a surprise to absolutely nobody in this community at the very least, okay, that turns out, you know, things are not going to get better. And it turns out that the Democratic Party's own internal assessment is that Israel was not actually violating humanitarian rights, you know? Turns out that was going on. Turns out Israel wasn't actually violating human rights, you know? Shocking. But before we get to that, let's do Trump's cabinet picks. One by one.
In Washington for the incoming Trump administration, President-elect Trump has made a flurry of additional picks for top jobs, including Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. Some names you know, some names are new additions. Weijia Zhang joins us now from West Palm Beach, Florida, with more on all of it. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning to you, Tony. Good morning to everybody. President-elect Trump is prioritizing key administration roles that really reflect his top campaign promises, securing the border and boosting the economy with energy independence. And all of the appointees have at least one thing in common: fierce loyalty to Trump. Just 1 week after his resounding victory, President-elect Donald Trump is filling out his top posts.
This is a nice crowd.
Yes, they love you.
South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is Trump's pick to become Homeland Security Secretary. Once considered a vice presidential contender, Noem faced controversy over accounts in her memoir, but remained a strong Trump ally on the campaign trail.
Those criminals, murderers, rapists that are threatening safety in our communities, they're going to be the first ones on the list to go.
Trump is also expected to name Florida Senator Marco Rubio as his choice for Secretary of State.
We want an America that dreams big again, and for that, we need to elect Donald Trump. That's the stake in this election.
It's a long way from their rivalry for the Republican nomination in 2016.
Little Marco Rubio, he's a total disaster.
Rubio isn't the only member of Congress who could join the new Trump administration.
I have never in my lifetime seen the world falling apart like it is under Joe Biden.
Florida Congressman Michael Waltz is Trump's choice for National Security Advisor.
I fully believe in his America First agenda.
Waltz,
Law that Trump's numbing any number of Jewish conservatives who'd be equally qualified for the Israel ambassador job. I'm sure all the people like Greg Gutfeld who concerned trolled about Harris not picking Shapiro over anti-Semitism would be very upset about this. No, but that's also partially because Israel is not going to be upset about this. So, of course, that's not, if Israel is not upset about this choice, then that's going to read as not anti-Semitic, right? That's the main point here, because Mike Huckabee is perhaps the absolute worst person for this position because he is a absolute psychopath, okay? In general, but certainly an absolute psychopath when it comes to Israel. He is one of the loudest voices that I have been chirping about endlessly in terms of conservative Christian far-right ultra-Zionism, okay? In the United States of America, are there Jewish Zionists? Of course, okay? You got, Miriam Adelson, for example, or Sheldon Adelson, and they are massive donors to the Republican Party, okay? And then there are liberal Zionists who are also Jewish, like Haim Saban, who are massive donors to the Democratic Party. But they all pale in comparison. Sheldon's dead, exactly, but Miriam is carrying the torch. But they all pale in comparison to the rabid nature an evangelical Protestant Christian who is an ultra-Zionist, because their goals are not specifically tied to Jewish people or a false understanding that like Jews will only be safe in Israel, yada, yada, yada. Their goals are insane. Their goals are immaterial. They are cultists with an understanding, with a theological understanding that like the apocalypse must happen. And the only way to do that is if Israel maintains that land that is exclusively comprised of Jews, okay? It is the most insane, like you can't reason with a person like that. You know what I mean? I mean, you might not be able to reason with a ultra-Zionist Jewish person either, but at the end of the day, it comes from a different kind of social conditioning. And worst of all, and I've said this many, many times over, there are a shitload more ultra-Zionist, white nationalist Christians in the evangelical base in the United States of America that have this theological understanding, this theological justification, demanding that the rapture occurs in raw numbers, then there are Jews, Zionist and anti-Zionist alike, okay? There are almost 10x the number of rabid evangelical Christians who believe in the apocalyptic reasons for why Israel must exist as a Jewish nation state. Then there are Jews across the board. You feel me? You smell me? You understand? And it's so funny because people just like completely forget that for one reason or another. I think on the liberal Democratic Party side, they conveniently ignore that because they want to run a defensive position for Israel by maintaining the position that like Israel is they do the pro-Israel anti-Semitism, the woke dual loyalty narratives. Okay, where they'll be like, no, you don't understand. Like all Jews are Zionists and it's anti-Semitic if you criticize Israel, right? But that is a major reason for why there's so much motion on this. Okay.
The decorated Green Beret veteran talked to CBS News about how he views U.S. priorities less than 1 week ago.
Let's end this war in Ukraine. Let's pivot to deal with China. Let's secure our border. Let's rebuild our military.
Stephen Miller will play a big role.
Yeah, anybody that says the West Bank is called Judea and Samaria is like an insta red flag. When Bill Clinton did it, it was unacceptable. And when Mike Huckabee does it, you're like, uh-oh.
Two.
America is for Americans and Americans only.
As Trump's pick for Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Miller helped mastermind the so-called Muslim ban and the zero-tolerance policy that separated families at the border during the first Trump presidency. Trump has also announced Lee Zeldin as head of the Environmental Protection Agency. The former New York congressman has been criticized by environmental groups for his voting record, and Zeldin has already promised to roll back Biden regulations.
Through the EPA, we have the ability to pursue energy dominance, to be able to make the United States the artificial intelligence capital of the world.
When someone says we got to do AI shit, just know that they want to they want to create new ecological disasters that you had not even comprehended before, okay? Every time you see one of those ugly ass AI art, all that AI art that you see that's ugly as they're basically boiling the coral reefs to be able to get that, okay? Oof. Yeah. Yes, we started a new denaturalization project under Trump in 2025, expected to be turbocharged. Justice Department establishes an office to denaturalize immigrants. That's what Stephen Miller said in 2023. Oh. Do you think the heavy use of AI over the last few years had a hand in the hurricane season insanity? I mean, certainly. Yeah, even oil companies are saying Trump is too extreme on climate change. This happened literally under the Trump administration as well. Oil giant ExxonMobil opposed President-elect Donald Trump's plans to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, a company spokesperson told to a CNN statement. A second U.S. exit from the Paris Climate Agreement will have profound implications for the United States' efforts to reduce its own emissions and for international efforts to combat climate change, an ExxonMobil spokesperson told in a statement. We advocate for policy that accounts for security, affordability, reliability, and environmental stewardship, not drastic changes that could hinder the progress being made today. I mean, it's performative for the most part. They much prefer the Joe Biden method, which was, aesthetically do the right things while still, increasing our over-reliance on fossil fuels. And, it's great. Good stuff. Great stuff. Overall. Wonderful.
To bring back American jobs to the auto industry and so much more.
Trump is heading to the White House tomorrow to meet with President Biden. It is a post-election tradition that did not happen back in 2020 because Trump did not invite Biden over when their roles were reversed. Tony?
We should thank you very much. Washington correspondent Major Garrett. Major, good morning to you. These picks matter because of the ideas people will bring to the White House, also because they're going to be overseeing huge budgets of American taxpayer dollars. But the order of these announcements tell us something, too, about Donald Trump. What does it say to you?
Two words, speed and sequence. Things are moving very rapidly. I would expect more announcements today, possibly Treasury Secretary, possibly Energy Secretary. So there's tremendous speed. There are PowerPoints presented to President-elect Trump. He's like, I don't need PowerPoints. I know what I want to do. Let's just move, move, move. Why do I say the word sequence? Because it's important as we are, as a nation, digesting these moves that, for example, Tom Homan was named the border czar before the
Yeah, I mean, he was, Obama's border guy, too, for the record. Expect liberals to get really mad about Tom Homan when, and you should get mad, but just remind yourselves maybe quietly that he worked under Obama as well.
There was an announcement about DHS Secretary or even Stephen Miller going in the White House as Deputy Chief of Staff of Policy. Why? Because Tom Homan, everyone knows in the Trump inner circle, will have direct access to the president, and that sequencing, naming him first, makes him more important on border matters than the DHS Secretary-to-be, Christine Ohm, or even Stephen Miller. Same thing I would say in the sequencing of announcing Elise Stefanik as the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations before naming Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. That's a very odd sequencing. Usually you do it the other way around. UN ambassador, much less important than the Secretary of State. Not for Trump. He wants Elise Stefanik, a staunch defender of Israel in the UN, to not only talk about America First diplomacy, but also have Israel's back. Not just Israel generally, but the Netanyahu government. So speed and sequence really matter.
I never paid attention to sequencing.
Thoughts on Stephen Miller? He is a very prominent neo-Nazi whose entire family despises him. He has no family. He has no friends. He has nothing in his life. The only thing he has is this resilient white supremacist, white nativist attitude and an agenda that he wants to follow through on that purges this nation of anyone that is like not white enough.
Sequencing before.
He has a wife.
I will. Major, what does it tell you, the people that he's chosen so far, what does it tell you about the cabinet he wants to build and the administration he intends to run?
Does he still have a wife?
So I covered the Trump transition in 2016 going into 2017. And back then, there were two great questions. What do I do, and how should I best do it? Trump didn't have answers to that.
He's had a wife since 2020 and 3 children now.
He's never been president before. He knows the answers now. What he wants is loyalty, and he wants direct reporting. He knows the cabinet secretaries have to go through a Senate confirmation process. What he wants, though, is czars or people who have direct report power to him, who he can basically create a straight line of accountability that doesn't run necessarily through that agency's bureaucracy. It goes straight to him. You're going to see that shape many of his appointments. Obviously, there will be cabinet secretaries, but there will be others who have direct report power to him, and he will try to use that to go around the bureaucracy when and where he can.
All right, Major, we've seen Trump talk about bypassing Senate confirmations with recess appointments. Between that and naming the czars in positions, what does he accomplish with that?
So it's worth pointing out, and I know this is ancient history, but during the Obama administration, congressional Republicans accused then-President Obama, who wanted to use recess powers to fill held positions, of using brazen, unconstitutional powers to do that. Now they're basically saying Trump should do that right away. So there's a disconnect there. Using recess appointments is something that the Supreme Court has basically restrained in a clash during the Obama administration. So there's Supreme Court precedent that will limit President Trump's powers to use recess appointment. But what he's trying to signal...
Oh, they'll definitely do that. This Supreme Court will definitely follow suit and act accordingly and maintain their... This Supreme Court will certainly maintain their original position. Yeah, famously, they always do that.
To the Senate Republicans and to the nation broadly is he's going to move as rapidly as he can, and if he's challenged in court, he may be set back, but he's going to move as aggressively as he can, and he wants Senate Republicans to get on board and help him as much as they're willing to.
All right, Major, he's moving very quickly. Thank you so much.
All right, Donald Trump's second administration is starting to take shape, and it is full of names you might recognize. Lee Zeldin, he's going to be running the EPA. Elise Stefanik will be the U.S. ambassador to the UN. Our friend and frequent guest, Stephen Miller, will be the deputy chief of staff for policy. And just breaking earlier tonight, there are multiple reports out tonight that Florida Senator Marco Rubio will be named Secretary of State. Now, Donald Trump is also naming former acting ICE Director Tom Homan as the new border czar. He will be in charge.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any Democrats in Trump's cabinet? Yeah. RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, maybe. No, of course not, dude. Are you crazy? Are they reclaiming the word czar? Guys, that word never went away, okay? I tried to explain to you guys when liberals were like, well, Kamala Harris is not a border czar. That's not an official position. It's like, no, that it is an unofficial way to describe that you are tasked with working on that position. Like, it's a very normal thing. Every administration has done this, okay? A border czar just means it's an unofficial designation for a person that's working on that. You do health czar, right? Yeah, it just means like border boss, the boss of the border, boss baby. How much government do you think we're gonna have after this administration? I don't know. Anyway, by the way, Elise Stefanik literally doesn't have a JD, doesn't even have a Bachelor of Science, just a career moron who straight out of college joined the Bush admin and never left politics since. She has no policy chops and has no diplomacy experience. You literally couldn't find someone less qualified if you tried. She literally is just a dumbass. Yeah. Yeah, her qualifications are that she bullied university presidents for not being sufficiently pro-Israel, and she popped off big time, and that's it. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get really, really, really bad. And after here's some more dumbass shit. Border Patrol morale soars after Trump's victory, higher than the first time he won.
Was announced as border czar. We heard all these sound bites of him turned out to be false.
Frustrated because no matter how good they do the migrant flow doesn't stop. And you know, the border security mission is being completely neglected because there seems to be no light. And
yeah, totally neglected. And then let's look at the dumbasses on the Democratic Party side, right? So we looked at like all the awful picks coming from Trump's cabinet, all the awful things that they are salivating to do. Okay. And I will dive a little bit further into the Mike Huckabee situation, who is an evangelical Zionist. And these guys are the absolute worst of the worst. Like, they are hallucinating. Okay. If you are an evangelical Zionist, you are the most insane person. Like, you legitimately, I'm going to describe it one more time, and I'm probably going to have to describe this a lot more. This is something I've talked about quite a bit. These guys have the most motion, okay? These guys have the most motion in American politics. Evangelicals do, okay? They have an outsized level of support from the Republican Party. They always feed that base, okay? It always feeds that. They always feed that base. Their belief is that Israel must, like, that entire Holy Land must be returned to God's chosen people, the Jews, so that the rapture can happen, so that Jesus can come back to earth and fight the devil and the devil's army in Megiddo. It sounds like an anime, but that is literally what they believe, okay? This is a very real thing that a shit ton, like tens of millions of Americans, unironically believe. That's why when you go to the Deep South and you're like, what the hell is this? You got like a King Rancher with truck nuts, and you got one sticker that says like Blue Lives Matter, another sticker that's like MAGA, and then the third sticker is like Am Israel High, okay? And you're like, why is this Christian man who is the most anti-Semitic person you've ever encountered so invested in Israel maintaining its Holy Land status? And that is because they believe in this anime understanding of the world. Okay? Straight up. Mike Huckabee is one of those people. In 2015, he told the Times of Israel that Israel's claim to the occupied West Bank is stronger than the United States' claim to Manhattan. Important to note that when he said this, he referred to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria and named the Palestinian Sea as an attempt to undermine their ties to the land. Okay?
Judea.
Here is Mike Huckabee talking about Israel, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews.
I never use the term West Bank. I find it offensive. We're talking about Judea and Samaria.
Yes, sir.
I never use the term West Bank.
Speaking of evangelism, what do American Jews think? New poll. The majority of American Jews demand stop offensive weapons, offensive U.S. weapons to Israel, 62%. Resume funding of UNRWA, 66%. Sanction Israeli leaders, 66%. Increase aid to Palestinians, 72%. Establishment of a Palestinian state, 72%. Remember when I told you every single American Jew could be an anti-Zionist tomorrow and America's opinion on Israel would not change? Well, time and time again, I have told you this, but no one listens to me. Now, you know, since October 7th, I've repeated this. One thing I regularly repeat, even if every single American Jew, I should say American Jewish person, became anti-Zionist overnight, the State Department over unconditional Israel would not change. These people polled, but clearly their wishes, opinions don't matter. Opinions clearly. Doing him dirty, chatting. I'm dog shit at video games. Yes, up. If Hasanabi ever decides to write a book, that shit's taking him 12 decades for sure. At least we're halfway through the Trump presidency while you were typing that tweet. Okay, everybody calm down, all right? Calm the down, okay? This is not a time to yell at your allies. I'm glad we're back to our roots of making fun of how slow you type. I know. We're there. We're there, okay? We're freaking there, baby. Huckabee in 2021 said that he identifies as Chinese, mocking race. Yeah, or mocking trans people too, I think. Chatters act like they've never workshopped the email before hitting send. I know. Huckabee guided private tours in Israel, 2015 article. He is like a real freak, okay? He's a real freak. He's a real one. Mike Huckabee, tour guide to the Holy Land. Trump has nominated Mike Huckabee as U.S. ambassador to Israel. Time for a quick review of the views agenda regarding Israel-Palestine that his nomination effectively endorses. Mike Huckabee, there's no such thing as Palestinians. Mike Huckabee, Palestinian state is a fantasy. Mike Huckabee, U.S. should fund building in Judea, Samaria. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee says Washington stop funding Gaza, divert funds to Jewish communities. Mike Huckabee considers buying a home in Judea and Samaria. Mike Huckabee declares West Bank to be a part of Israel during settlement visit. Republican presidential candidate includes Judea and Samaria. Biblical name for the West Bank is a part of all of Israel during visit to discuss Iran nuclear deal. Mike Huckabee, Israel's claim to Judea and Samaria is stronger than U.S. tie to Manhattan. Yeah, another tremendous victory for the anti-neocon faction. Time for regime change in Iran, he says. We should empower Iran's democratic opposition to topple the regime. Yeah, what happened to the Trump will end the wars people? I told y'all. Okay? I told y'all he wasn't going to do that. Even the people who were like worried about, where the war efforts will go for Ukraine. I told you, like, this is not about Donald Trump. These are not decisions that come from Donald Trump. Okay? That's it. America is uniparty when it comes to its foreign policy. One party pushes the needle further, the other party caves and capitulates and consolidates support, making that the American foreign policy. Okay? Yeah, we're going to do Colin Allred's shitty ass campaign in a second. Various updates from Washington Post. Trump is expected to name 4 deputy chiefs of staff: James Blair, Taylor Budowich, Jan Scavino, Stephen Miller. Washington Post confirms the notice scoop that Senator Joni Ernst is interested in Secretary of Defense. Trump is looking to appoint William McGinley for White House counsel. He is White House cabinet secretary in the first administration. Now, the most important role in the Trump administration, no matter which side you're on, Matthew G. Whitaker, is likely to be Trump's pick for U.S. Attorney General. Many of you likely seen Whitaker on TV defending Trump. He was acting attorney general during the first Trump administration and a harsh Mueller critic. The goal has never been more clear. Okay? I'm telling you right now, the goal is to basically destabilize the entire region, okay, and pack it up to the best of their ability in the interim, in the short term. I'm talking about the Middle East, so they can change the crosshairs towards China, okay? They will try to very quickly deal with Iranian influence in the region. They'll beef up Israel. They'll probably go to war. It's not going to be quick enough. They're never going to be able to deal with this in a fast-paced manner, I think. But the ultimate goal in the upcoming decade is to basically re-envision the Middle East to suit their desires, to control it completely, and then turn around and set the crosshairs against China. Now, Iran is not like Iraq or Afghanistan. Those conflicts were legitimately harmful for America at the end of the day, and they were obviously unsuccessful. We shall see what happens. But I think that their goal is to basically give Israel as much land as possible and as much control over the region as possible, and then turn around and move towards China. Okay? The Arab Americans who backed Donald Trump in Dearborn, Michigan sent him his letter today, but addressed the White House, urging him to fulfill his promises to the community and work on an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. I've already mentioned this, but I do personally think that Netanyahu might give him a gimme, offer a brief period of ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities, that comes with a permanent annexation of at least North Gaza, okay, in an effort to have a quiet period where they get to beef up their military as fast as possible, lick their wounds, and go back for a permanent annexation of the West Bank. It's bleak, it's terrifying. I don't even know if Israel has the capability of pulling off something like this. I don't even know if America has the capability of pulling off something like this alongside Israel. And I certainly don't know how the United States of America is going to respond and how hard they're going to go for Israel. Okay? We shall see. But Hamas wouldn't agree to that, right? I mean, for their goals at this point is to have any kind of ceasefire whatsoever. They've been demanding a ceasefire from the jump. Whether they agree to it or not, I think doesn't change that dynamic. Israel could stop the halt. Israel could cease fire right now. Okay? Israel could cease its hostilities tomorrow, yesterday. It's entirely up to them to stop the pain. We ain't doing shit, dog. Oh, yeah. Meanwhile, this is the current state of affairs in our current State Department. Just so you understand, this is the Democratic leadership. Remember Biden's red line? That's supposed to materialize in the next 3 days. So when asked the question, a direct question, the State Department says it doesn't know how many trucks have entered Gaza in the past 30 days, despite demanding that Israel allow 350 trucks a day or face policy consequences. And in a notable shift, the spokesman characterized the demands in the letter as simply suggestions for Israel to take. BBC's Tom Bateman pressed further, reporting that the UN says only 37 trucks have entered each day, about 1/10 of what was requested. Have the Israelis ended the isolation in the north? Here's Patel's answer.
November 1st through November 9th. I don't have updated metric beyond that.
I don't care about watching Piers Morgan versus Dan Bilzerian. Yes, I know Dan Bilzerian is anti-Semitic. Okay? If you think that this is news to me, you are delusional. If you think that while I'm doing real news coverage, you want me to watch some drama shit where I don't like either of the parties involved, you're out of your goddamn mind. Be serious for a moment. We're literally covering State Department briefings right now.
But at least from November 1st to November 9th, we have seen 404 trucks cross into Gaza. Again, Tom, the point is not that this number is satisfactory. We certainly don't feel it is. But the point here is that some of the steps that we've seen taken, it is our hope that those steps have created the operational conditions to allow for an additional influx of trucks, to allow for an additional influx of aid.
It's not what the letter said. The letter says enable a minimum of 350 trucks per day to enter Gaza. And this is in the context of a letter that says you've got 30 days to do it. And failure to demonstrate a commitment to this may have implications under US law. The United Nations says an average of 37 trucks a day have entered in the month of October. That's 1/10 of what you've asked for.
Certainly, there needs to be more progress when it comes to the metrics for trucks, Tom. But again, the point that I was making, and I'll reiterate it here, is that our hope is that these kinds of changes have allowed for the operational adjustments to see an additional influx of trucks and to see if that metric can be met or not. And if it is not, of course, we're going to press and continue to raise this with our partners in Israel. And ultimately, as you heard me say, the government of Israel and the United Nations have a responsibility to do everything they can to make sure that that number.
I like how nobody took this 30-day deadline serious. Everyone knew they were bullshitting. Yeah, I mean, I said it back then. It's not real. Not only is it not real, but it's also like a you to the current order of business. Like it's a you to Kamala Harris too. Yeah, we'll do a red line that we won't enforce after the election.
Is met. As you just heard me say at the top of this, we have seen, this reopening of Erez, this new crossing at Kisufim. We've seen some additional routes open up within Gaza. These things we think will help, hopefully help create the space to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that about the measures, but I'm just asking about what you demanded in the letter. So then we had end the isolation of the north. That was a specific demand in the letter. Have the Israelis ended the isolation of the north?
We have seen some restoration of deliveries to the north that had been closed for a few weeks. First, as you heard me say, to Gaza City, as well as this week into some areas surrounding Jabalia as well.
Well, you said around Jabalia. You didn't say in Jabalia.
Areas around Jabalia and then first to Gaza City.
So that's not inside Jabalia, which presumably remains under siege.
Tom, I'm not going to get into a specific tit for tat on every item in the letter. The letter was a suggestion of steps that we think that they should take.
I mean, they're just, it's so cowardly. It's so shitty. Meanwhile, watch Biden to Herzog. He had a conversation with Israeli President Herzog, who is anti-miscegenation, by the way. Real progressive voice out here. Mr. Anti-miscegenation himself. You might remember him from putting up copies of Mein Kampf to be like, this is what the Palestinian children are reading in Gaza. Here's what Biden had a conversation with Herzog over. What the f? Why is this so quiet?
Archaeological artifact from the foot of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which has the word.
Okay, I'm just going to read it. Biden to Herzog says, I remember how I got in trouble back then when I said years ago as a senator, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, and I am a Zionist. Herzog, I know you are. Clearly a Zionist. Well, God love you.
Remember how I got in trouble? We were friends even back then when I said.
Israel President Herzog to Biden. I'm here on behalf of the people of Israel, the nation state of Israel, and the state of Israel to say thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. As we say in Hebrew, Toda Rabbah, we will never forget how you stood up with us in our darkest hour. This happened at the meeting too.
Biden, do you think that you can get a hostage deal by the end of your term?
I think you can get hit in the head by a camera behind you.
If he thinks that he can get a hostage deal done by the end of his term, he answered, commenting on the number of cameramen in the room. Do you think you can get hit in the head by the cameraman behind you?
All right. Thank you all.
Interesting. This happened at the meeting too? Yeah, I just covered it. They don't even care anymore? Yeah. First of all, it's not because of his senility, okay? He's not senile when he says that. He's coherent when he says that. That's just him saying, F you, suck my dick, F the hostages is what he's saying, okay? And they never cared. Of course they didn't care. You think Israel cared about the hostages? You think the Israeli government gave a shit about the hostages, dude? Benjamin Netanyahu's psychopathic jackbooted thugs, the Likudniks, the Bibis, were already ripping the hostage posters in Israel. I repeatedly explained it to you. Hostage posters in America play a very different role than hostage posters in Israel. Hostage posters in America and in the Western world was to say Israel's bombing campaign must continue. Hostage posters in Israel, on the other hand, played a significant role in disrupting the bombing campaign because the people that were putting up the hostage posters were immediately related to the hostages. So they were like, remember the hostages, stop bombing Gaza.
Humanitarian situation. We have 8 aid groups who came out today and said that the situation has not only not gotten better, it's gotten worse over the past 30 days. So how do you square?
Saudi Arabia started shifting its policy towards Yemen after Trump was elected president, and now they're not interested in a peace deal. It looks like they will turn around to war against the Houthis. Yeah, this is where China comes into play, because the reason why there was a ceasefire negotiation that China executed between Saudi Arabia and Iran was not specifically because China is a great peacemaker or anything like that. It was in the Saudi interest to maintain a better relationship with Iran because the Houthis and Iran were directly targeting Saudi oil refineries. They already failed to defeat the Houthis. They already failed to defeat the Ansar Allah administration once, okay? And they suffered far worse repercussions in that process. Yes, they did a genocide, okay? But it doesn't matter when all they know in the poorest nation on the planet is being dominated regardless. This is the thing that I keep repeating to people that they refuse to understand. The penalties that you incur as a developed nation in the confines of luxury in the Western sphere of influence is very different than the human cost and what kind of dramatic attitude swings occur when you're a Yemeni citizen. Okay, that's why the Ansar Allah administration's actions against Israel, instituting a blockade on the Red Sea, was so overwhelmingly popular for everyone in Yemen that armed factions that were killing each other prior to this event put down their arms and said, we are all one nation. We stand with the Ansar Allah regime. So that's it. Like, these people do not have the same perspective that you do living in the United States of America or in a nice neighborhood in Europe, okay? All they've known is war. That's all they've known. And that is precisely the reason why killing a shit ton of these people is not going to stop them. That's why America is lost time and time again, okay? Barack Ravid says, I don't want to depress you, but because of the Israeli government, we are much closer to Israeli settlements being built in Gaza. At J Federations, Barack Ravid says, the Jewish Federations of North America, I don't want to depress you, but because of the Israeli government, we are much closer to Israeli settlements being built in Gaza than hostages coming home from Gaza. Shocked murmurs, lots of oh my God from a crowd usually solidly pro-Israel. Yeah, liberals are going to hit the liberal Zionist exit ramp now when they could have pulled on that cord under the Biden administration but refused to do so. Just wait. Acclaimed British surgeon testifies to the UK Parliament detailing how IDF quadcopters could arrive at the scene of airstrikes in Gaza, pick off, shoot the injured, including children.
Was that a bomb would drop maybe on a crowded, tented area, and then the drones would come down and...
Please take your time. We're incredibly grateful that you're making the time to be here today, and I can only imagine just how it has impacted you and will continue to impact you. And I feel, because you can't unsee what you've seen, but being able to share that with us really helps us hold.
And before liberals turn around and say, what did you expect? These people voted for Trump. They deserve it. You're a piece of shit, okay? Because what they're talking about, the gruesome details that this doctor is talking about, happened under the watchful eye of the liberal international rule-based order. And that's why I showed you Biden's reaction and Biden's conversation with Isaac Herzog. That's why I showed you that the current State Department, under Democratic leadership, has overseen this genocide and has defended it tooth and nail every step of the way. Okay?
Continue to pay close attention.
But it's important, isn't it? Because
what happened to that red line that they were supposed to enforce? Nothing. Everybody knew it wasn't going to be enforced.
That with this assessment that they you have or non-assessment that they are in violation?
Jenny, I can't speak to the kinds of assessment that these groups made. Certainly have seen that reporting. But to Matt, I just laid out some of the metrics that we saw. We saw the reopening of Erez. We saw a new crossing opening.
Measure. You're saying, okay, they did this, but we were told, you guys said it would be based on the results on the ground that have not borne out here. So I get. Can you talk us through the deliberation here?
I'm not going to get into the deliberative process, Jenny, but specifically when we're talking about specific metrics or specific actions or things on the ground, the hope is that the operational changes that have been made through some of these things, for example, just the waiving of the customs requirement in the Jordanian corridor or the reopening of certain crossings, the additional internal routes that we've seen open up.
How is there any way to be remotely optimistic about this? Seems like nothing is ever going to improve. No, it's not. It's going to get worse. That's it. And not only is it going to get worse, at the domestic level, you are going to see a lot more right-wing commentary everywhere. It's already everywhere, but it's going to even grow. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. And then in that process, I think there will be left-wing mobilization as well, but that's neither here nor there. I don't know. I don't know how we get out of this situation.
The hope and the desire is that things like that will make it possible for an additional increase in humanitarian aid and trucks to get to the places where it needs to go. And of course, if that doesn't end up being the case, this is something that we are constantly evaluating and constantly assessing. And if that...
Please, can you offer anything besides guess you better die to chatters, me freaking out? The f*** do you mean, man? What are you saying? What do you want me to say? You want me to lie to you? Like, no. The only thing you can look forward to in the upcoming 4 years is protecting yourself and protecting your communities and protecting the people around you. Okay? Organize. That's it. I can't lie to you and be like, no, shit's going to be great. It's not. Okay? It's just not going to be great at all. And as I said, I will keep trying. I will keep working. And I urge you to do the same thing. And in times of, in moments of weakness, okay, in moments of insecurity and vulnerability, remember that the only thing you can change is the only thing you have control over is your own body, is your own life, okay? So improve your immediate circumstances to the best of your ability so you can be better at organizing for others, okay? That's it.
That doesn't be the case. We, of course, are going to make sure that how they are conducting themselves is in compliance with U.S. law. There is no doubt about that. But we also have seen some steps taken that we think will address things like throughput, that will address things like capacity, that will
join an organization, talk to your neighbors, okay? Join a intramural league, talk to normal human beings. Get the f*** off the internet if you have to. That's it. The only thing you can rely on is other like-minded individuals, okay? Yeah, join the DSA, join PSL, join local organizations that are issue specific, okay? Join non-political organizations as well. The only thing you can rely on is your community in times like this, okay? And never stop the pressure, because the one thing that you always have to remember is that, at least in all of my years of advocating for Palestinian emancipation, the one thing that I've always seen is that these guys who have only known death and destruction their whole lives since birth, okay? Palestinians living in Gaza, Palestinians living in the West Bank, the only thing they've ever known is Israeli domination, the apartheid regime, and its most violent and its most humiliating, ritualistic humiliation that they subject the Palestinians to. And in spite of all, they have existed and continue to exist and continue to resist it. Okay? So if they can do it, you can do it too. All right? That's it. You can't let people, you can't let systems destroy your life, even when they're actively working to erase you. You have to still put your best foot forward. You have to still organize. You have to still advocate for others. And instead of sitting around online and crying about it, you have to keep enjoying yourself as well, no matter what happens. That's it. At moments like this, it's very easy to find yourselves in the throes of nihilism, to be like, nothing is going to change, so why should I care? Nothing is going to change, so why should I do anything about it? This shit sucks. Okay? And the reality of the matter is, you got to do it for other people, and you got to make sure that you are standing on firm ground. Okay? Yeah. This was a funny thing that I saw. Remember when Post Left Watch posted this Will Menaker tweet? Or this Will Menaker moment from Chapo Trap House?
Felix, I think another thing at work here is like the fact that like every evil thing, like for instance, like if you're a liberal Zionist, you have to be against the West Bank settlements. And then like as long as Netanyahu's in charge, those are never going to stop. And in fact, they're going to intensify. I think you see a similar dynamic here in Democrats when they're confronted with the fact that Arab Americans or Muslim Americans are maybe withholding their vote from Joe Biden. And you see how immediately the Seldowitz jumps out of them.
Yeah,
they're like, enjoy being in a camp. And I think for the liberals, they need to have a bad right-wing guy carrying this out so they can displace onto that figure the evil things that they secretly want to take place.
Absolutely.
You know, like threatening, like for Democrats to be threatening Muslim Americans with deportation under Trump, wink, wink, is just like they just want Trump to do that for them so they can say, oh, we didn't actually do that. We support Muslims.
Absolutely.
But as soon as they become inconvenient.
Yeah, Stuart Seldowitz is who he's referencing, the famous racist Obama administration guy who did a hate crime and was like doing daily harassment to this Egyptian food cart guy in New York.
Like, for instance, like whether they are voicing a political opinion in America as citizens of this country or inconvenient in terms of like they live in a part of the world that Israel thinks is theirs, that their lives are forfeit. And they don't want to hear anything about it.
Arabs and Muslims, like more generally, have their use as long as they're firmly within the Democratic camp. And then once if they make any attempt to stray from that, or like or any advocacy for anything but like
we need like an ethno-nationalist threatening to like ethnically cleanse the country to keep everyone in line. And to keep the good, to keep the liberal side, to keep our good minorities in the tent pitching for us.
Will is describing why liberals will always hate us more than they hate the hogs. The hogs give them what they desire most, which is moral superiority. We treat them like they treat the hogs. They'll always fight us harder. Exactly. That's why there was so much resistance to Bernie Sanders internally in the Democratic Party. Obviously, the material reasons was Bernie Sanders was showcasing a method that was ultimately disruptive for the corporate donors within the party, and they care about that a lot more. But also on the messaging front, Bernie Sanders showcasing that like there is a different, very populist message that you could push for, that you could put forward, was the scariest prospect for the Democrats. Why was it the scariest prospect for the Democrats? Because God forbid you get a bunch of progressive-minded individuals that are the base of support for the Democratic Party, and there are plenty of them, okay? Some of them vote reliably, some of them don't vote so reliably, but it doesn't matter. They exist, right? All of those people would go, wait a minute, I agree with that guy. And that is the most terrifying prospect. That is the scariest prospect for the Democratic Party. It's not a strong Republican Party. It's not a Republican Party that is doing a shit ton of fascism. Because they can always present themselves as like the counterbalance towards that. As things get worse and worse for them, as things get worse and worse for marginalized populations in this country, they can always point to how much worse things are under Republican leadership and collect nice-ass pay stubs or nice-ass paychecks and farm donations, right? To quote-unquote resist. MSNBC is supposed to be the Fox News equivalent for the Democratic Party. And for every one radical leftist Bernie-style person on there, there are a million former George W. Bush administration PR professionals, okay? Understand that. They are more afraid of the actual left because the actual left makes them look cowardly and weak. The actual left makes them look like they have no real interest in defending people. That's why you see so many of these like out of touch DC consultants that are stuck in this idiotic bubble consistently going on television and being like, it's actually woke that caused the the Democratic Party to lose. Okay? They didn't go woke at all. As a matter of fact, they were significantly more, even annoyingly woke, aesthetically woke, closer to the Latinx narratives in 2020 when they did win. Okay?
Because that threat of being, even more egregiously victimized or oppressed is just held over their head. Not actually listening to them or doing anything that would actually win their vote. But no, like they need to be disciplined with the threat, whether it's Netanyahu in Israel or Trump in America.
Well, I mean, and like the simple calculation that the White House has made, which, maybe makes sense for them, right? Is that there is a much more moneyed and influential block of voters, and those are people who are pro-Israel, whether they're mostly on the Democratic side, Jewish or Christian, that compared to the Muslim lobby and the Muslim voting bloc is completely outweighs them.
Anyway, when Israel annexes the West Bank and its 3 million Palestinian residents and refuses to give them equal rights, there will be no argument left over whether it is an apartheid state. At that point, it can either go on as an apartheid state and face international isolation or grant equal rights. No third party since they foreclosed Palestinian statehood. They already don't have an argument. They are already an apartheid state. The West Bank has already been annexed in practical terms. They may make it formal now, which would mean the end of the two-state paradigm. It would allow a shift to working towards equal rights for all citizens of Israel in one state. And they 100% will absolutely do Jim Crow style apartheid shit once the West Bank is permanently annexed. They're just going to keep deporting as many Palestinians as possible, and maybe even Palestinian citizens of Israel, as they are doing right now, okay? As they are increasing the pressure upon the Palestinian citizens of Israel that have been granted citizenship since 1967.
Legislators particularly to account. So we do appreciate the time that you're making for us today. Thank you.
So, anyway, I know you criticize me, but I do think the accelerationist perspective is super valid now. It's our only option to work harder and faster. I already told you this. It is the Democrats that accelerated, okay? Yes, I didn't finish that clip. I don't want to watch a doctor talk about how quadcopters assassinated children, okay? I know that the doctor is going to say that. I don't want to watch it, okay? I've seen it. I've seen it a million times over. Enough. The U.S. State Department says it has not made an assessment that Israel is in violation of U.S. law in reference to the 30-day U.S. deadline. It says there is no policy change to announce. The U.S. State Department saying it has not made an assessment that Israel is in violation of U.S. law in reference to the 30-day U.S. deadline for Israel to improve conditions in Gaza comes after 8 humanitarian organizations announced the opposite. Here are the 8 humanitarian organizations that find Israel failing or being insufficient on every single demand the U.S. gave it last month to improve the situation in Gaza over 30 days. Enabling a minimum of 350 trucks per day to enter Gaza. They didn't do that. Instituting adequate humanitarian pauses across Gaza as necessary to enable humanitarian activities, including vaccinations, deliveries, and distribution, at least for the next 4 months. They didn't do that. U.S. won't suspend military aid to Israel as Gaza deadline expires. My story on Axios. In a surprise to absolutely no one, there is no change, and Biden's red line was nothing. Who could have thought? Who could have foreseen this? Who could have seen this happen? Israel's liberal opposition. Okay. Pay attention to where the U.S.-Israel policy may be heading. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, who President-elect Donald Trump nominated Tuesday to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel, previously argued that there was no such thing as a Palestinian. Huckabee, who has been a strong defender of Israel throughout his career, made the statement in his 2008 presidential campaign asserting that Palestinian identity was a political tool to try and force land away from Israel. In a CNN video obtained by Andrew Kaczynski during Huckabee's 2015 run for president, Huckabee suggested that if a Palestinian state were to be created, it should be in neighboring countries like Egypt, Syria, or Jordan, rather than within Israel's borders, which he includes Judea and Samaria in it, which is the West Bank, occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank, which Mike Huckabee refers to as Judea and Samaria. Basically, there's really no such thing as, I need to be careful about saying this because people will get really upset. There's really no such thing as a Palestinian, Huckabee said at a 2008 campaign stop in Massachusetts while speaking to 2 Orthodox Jewish men. There is not. Yeah, I don't want to watch it. A thread by the head of the opposition, Yair Lapid, explaining how he supports collective punishment against the families of terrorists and banishing Minister of Knesset Ofer Kassif from the Knesset. The real opposition in Israel is about 5 to 14 members of the Knesset out of 120. This is the liberal opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu saying this. I'm in favor of deporting families of terrorists, just as I was in favor of the removal of Ofer Kassif. Today I sat with the Hagavor Forum, a forum of bereaved families identified with the right and the demand to continue the war in Gaza. We had a good and fair conversation, even about the things that we disagree on. Israel is full-blown fascist. Anyone that tries to say that that's anti-Semitic is a delusional loser coping with their own personal commitments and their own personal idealistic understanding of what Israel represents. That's it. And no, I will never stand down from openly recognizing that reality. Okay? You can suck my dick. Sick and tired of having to deal with people's own personal biases. Like, this is just cognitive dissonance in full display. I don't know if you saw this. I mean, it's the least shocking thing this piece of shit has said. Anyway, let's get the fucking... oh, by the way, where are we at with... before we get to Colin Allred, okay? Trita Parsi went on CNN to talk about Trump's war hawk cabinet.
Trita Parsi, an expert on US-Iranian relations, author of Losing an Enemy. It's good to have you both.
Will you ship to Canada if that law passes? What do you mean? Canada and England literally are already ahead of the United States of America in terms of like aggressively pursuing anyone and everyone that says anything about Israel. Yeah, Canada's really going to be a safe haven for me.
Trita, let me start with you. What should we take out
Canada literally adopted the IHRA definition already
of the meeting in Riyadh yesterday?
I think it's a very strong indication of where some of the Arab states in the Persian Gulf are leaning towards. The analysis among some of the hawks in the Trump circle is that they can go back to the situation in 2016 and 2017, where they laid the groundwork for some form of an Arab-Israeli alliance against Iran, which the Arabs at the time were quite in favor of. Things have changed, however. At this point, it's very clear both the Saudis and the Emiratis want to make sure that they absolutely stay out of any war that involves the United States, Israel, and Iran. And part of the reason for this, of course, is the anger amongst their own.
This is what I mentioned. Mohammed bin Salman yesterday, despite his own personal disagreements, openly recognized what Israel's doing is genocide. Okay, just so you understand. So it's a unique predicament, and I think Americans are operating on the OG, like on the old school assessment of the situation. And yes, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, would be very knowledgeable on genocides, you know. Anyway, so yeah, here it is at the Arab Summit. The kingdom reiterates its categorical rejection of the genocide committed by Israel against the brotherly Palestinian people, which has left more than 150,000 martyrs and injured, most of whom are women and children. Now, the other side of the story, regardless of Mohammed bin Salman's own personal convictions that it would be so much better if all Palestinians ceased to exist, which he has openly recognized time and time again, because he just wants Neom. He just wants like Saudi to be in the sphere of influence of the Western world. He wants tourism. He wants to diversify the Saudi portfolio. These are things that he is trying to do. For him, it's like, yeah, the Palestinians present an issue because his own people, understandably, have a very different mindset on the emancipatory struggle of the Palestinians. Now, having said that, he still has to obviously optically be against Israel, regardless of what his own personal ambitions or his own personal convictions might look like. Now, having said that, okay, the other side of the story is not just about Saudi Arabia. It's not what MBS is saying. Mohammed bin Salman is saying. The other side is China. China does not want instability. China does not want Iran and Saudi to be at each other's throats. So for China, he wants energy to keep flowing. And for that reason, because they need oil for their projects and their, their developmentary projects. Okay. China has already instituted a peace negotiation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. This happened before October 7. China brokered a ceasefire between Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Biden was the one opposing it and wanting to continue the blockade of Yemen. Having said that, okay, the major pressure point for Saudi Arabia in coming to the table for this wasn't just because China wanted it. It was because Saudi Arabia does not want their oil refineries to be lit on fire. That's it. Okay? That's it. They saw during the Formula One thing in their, sports washing initiatives, they saw in the backdrop their oil refineries on fire. That is never going to be good. That's not a good look. That doesn't say this is a safe country that you can come to, white tourists. And that certainly is not good for their economic interests, regardless. That picture is the real reason why they came to the table. That picture is the real reason why they haven't been so over the top with their support of Israel's defense, even though they have supported Israel's defense, specifically over the Red Sea.
Populations with what Israel has been doing in Gaza and the West Bank and increasingly in Lebanon, but also because of realization that Iran's ballistic missiles are so effective that they penetrated Israel's many layers of air defenses, and as a result will also be able to penetrate whatever the United States has provided these countries. So they're much more vulnerable vis-a-vis Iran as well than what they thought they were back in 2016. All of this is adding to their desire to stay out of any type of a conflict and help de-escalate the situation.
Anyway,